Hey there, good morning, Indiana. Welcome to Who's Left this week, the only unapologetically progressive Sunday morning news and talk show for the Hoosier State. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers. I am broadcasting from Bloomington, and we have got a packed show, got a great panel coming up to join me for the discussion. I hope you all had a Merry Christmas and are preparing to have a lovely New Year. I hope Santa was good and brought you some nice gifts. I got this fantastic new sweater, real 100% Muppet fur, sustainably, ethically sourced, of course. Before we get going here, a little bit of housekeeping. I do need to make sure you are subscribed over there at whosleft.us, where we still have a special going from now until the end of the year. Normally $50 for the year or $5 a month to help support this project. Currently 30% off. I only need about $350. That's $350 a month or $35 for the whole year to help us organize more, write more, research more, do more stuff like this. And, bring you more fantastic guests like the following. Also, special note, tonight I will be back on these here very fine affiliates with Nick Marshall. Nick is running for state senate down in District 45 on the Indiana side of the Ohio River down there in Kentuckiana. His opponent, current incumbent Senator Chris Garton, made national news on Christmas Day by posting AI slop images of himself beating up Santa Claus. So we will talk all about that tonight. We'll spare you that discussion this morning. But for now, why don't we go ahead and bring in our guests? Let's see. There is, returning to the show, our good friend, Chuck Gill. Chuck, welcome.
Thank you for having me on, Scott. Appreciate it.
Always love having you around. Welcome to the show. Got some Navy stuff we're going to talk about here in a little bit. Interested to hear your perspective on that.
Absolutely. Ready for it.
Also, a returning guest. There is our good friend Tabitha Zeigler. Tabitha is the host of the Staring Down the Storm podcast, Autism Advocacy in America. We've got some stuff related to autism therapy toward the end of the show. Interested to hear what you've got to say about that.
Sure. Welcome. Happy to be here.
And finally, this week, we got some stuff for him to comment on too, if he can, and he's not the kind of guy to withhold comment. There is the people's champ, Indianapolis City County Councilor Jesse Brown. Jesse, welcome.
Thanks, Scott. Happy to be here. Always a pleasure. And did you bury the lead here that it's your birthday? I mean, when you're asking for subscribers, you got to say, hey, by the way, this is a special birthday gift to me personally. It's all about the ego. Learn from a politician.
No, thank you for mentioning that and for reminding me to point up here at this very fine little QR code there. If you can't do the annual subscription or the ongoing monthly subscription, I understand this time of year budgets are tight. You can give a one-time contribution at that link. That'll take you to our Venmo page. So let us go ahead and take off these socials where you should be following me as well. While we got that graphic up on the screen, it's at Who's Left on most of them. On Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky, it's at whosleft.us. Now, let us break out our fantastic graphics here. And, no, that's the end graphics. Come on, get with the program, Scott. All right, there we go. Let us begin this week's news. And we're going to start on the national and international side and zoom this thing in as we go. So, first, let's start with a little bit of good news. This week, the Supreme Court refused to lift a lower court order blocking President Trump from deploying the National Guard in Chicago, ruling the administration failed, at least at this stage, to show legal authority to use the military to execute domestic laws. This despite dissents from the most extreme justices warning the decision could hinder the protection of masked federal officers. That concludes the good news portion of today's show. Sticking with the courts, so earlier this year, they heard arguments in a case challenging Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. this week we got an analysis from a couple groups, Fair Fight Action and Black Voters Matter, which warns if this case goes the way many are suspecting it could, Republicans could pick up roughly 200 state legislative seats across the South, warning these groups warn the change would enable racial gerrymanders that sharply reduce Black and Hispanic representation. Now, we've mentioned this story before vis-a-vis congressional races, but I think this is the first analysis we've seen in terms of state legislative races and the harm that could be done there. Additionally, in briefs, this from Jezebel, the Trump administration has quietly ordered Citizenship and Immigration Services to massively ramp up denaturalization, imposing quotas of 100 to 200 citizenship stripping cases per month in 2026, a more than 100 times increase over historical norms, despite experts warning it's legally unsustainable and designed less to win cases than to intimidate naturalized citizens and deter future immigrants. Also this week, President Trump ordered an immediate pause on 5 offshore wind projects, which are at various stages of completion and potentially capable of powering some 2.7 million homes, escalating his campaign against wind energy and triggering warnings of higher electricity prices, grid reliability risks, and a freeze in bipartisan permitting talks. In economic news, Jim Beam will halt bourbon production for at least a year at its Claremont, Kentucky distillery beginning in 2026 as the industry grapples with falling U.S. drinking rates, tariff-driven export declines, especially to Canada, and the long lead time required to age bourbon. Now, fortunately, the company will keep other operations running and avoid layoffs by reassigning workers. I'm doing my part. I need the rest of y'all to keep up. Finally, in briefs, lots of bad news, but hey, at least Wegovy for everybody, right? The FDA approved the first daily pill for obesity, an oral version of Wegovy from Novo Nordisk, giving the company a lead over Eli Lilly and potentially expanding access to GLP-1 drugs as the pill delivers near injectable weight loss results, could be cheaper to produce, and may reach patients who can't afford or won't use weekly injections. See, in Trump's economy, you might not be able to eat, but with Wegovy, you won't notice that you're hungry. Chuck, among those briefs, what stands out to you this week?
Hard pickings, as far as I can. I mean, I guess I'll go back to, the limitation of minority voices. I guess because that's kind of a theme of this first section, especially. I mean, yes, SCOTUS has kind of decided to take a good stand with the immigrant or the federal officers issue, but I guess I'll say this: it's like, okay, at what point are the crowds actually presenting the problem, or the protesters actually presenting the problem? I mean, I'm sorry, if I have somebody masked with that doesn't have any identifying authority to come after folks, I'm going to be asking questions and hopefully protecting those folks. I mean, that is literally what I did for 7 years in the Navy, protecting everybody's rights to free assembly and to speak their mind. I know that's a weird concept nowadays, apparently, to the other side, but just saying. But with the thing on the state law side, I mean, again, I just think that there's this overwhelming thing from the Tangerine Terrors administration of saying that they want to provoke fear. They want to instill, to put down dissidents in all these areas. And, it's kind of like, again, it's this march towards tyranny and authoritarianism that is just blatantly out there they're not even bothering to hide it anymore. Which, okay, I mean, at least they're being straightforward about it now, but I think it presents us the challenge of, hey, we can now point to it to say, this is what we need to fight against. Everybody is entitled to representation, and everybody should have a voice in it. And the fact that they're trying to limit that is just absolutely astounding to me. And that's what we should, hopefully what we as Democrats and everybody that actually cares about the country is going to use as our focal points moving forward.
They really are trying to undo the progress of the 20th century, it seems. Mm-hmm. And speaking of stories I've heard before, Tabitha, Crazy old guy rails against windmills. I feel like I've heard that story.
You know what's interesting is he's playing off of people in rural communities that don't have enough knowledge, are fearful in general, but are also seeing a large uptick in, just acres and acres of farmland that is being bulldozed and replaced with these just megalithic windmill systems or solar panel systems, and they don't like it. So just really from face value, right? If you try and come out into these very red communities as a Democrat and try and say, hey, let's talk about windmills, they're going to be like, right, let's talk about the last fifth generation farming families that have either gone under or whatever because of these windmill farms. So it's hard to even make the argument. And they're just like tagging their trains to that issue. And they're not giving people the opportunity to really hear the arguments. It turns into this thing of where does your loyalty lie? Does your loyalty lie to the Republican Party and to Trump, or does your loyalty lie to your family?
Yeah. Well, these, they can't make the argument about land being taken up. Like these are offshore wind projects, and they're over the horizon. You can't even see them from land. Like this is just like an attack on wind power for the sake of attacking wind power. Like I don't even know how anybody could object to these things other than Trump's big fossil fuel owners.
Well, you see my point though, right? Yeah. Where it's like, hey, we're essentially, if you're not like a really rich white rapist, we're all on the same team at this point. So let's try and have these conversations.
Absolutely. Jesse, how about you? Any of those briefs stick out to you? Like, what do you make of this denaturalizing people push? This doesn't happen. You can't take people's citizenship away except for very, very unique, extreme circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, the citizenship is one of the ones I was thinking of talking about. The voting rights case, the Supreme Court, like all of it, I think is kayfabe. To use a wrestling analysis that I know you'll appreciate, Scott. Like we grow up in this country learning about the checks and balances between different branches of government, and to a large extent, I think the MAGA movement and Trump's success has been calling that bluff. Just be like, I don't see any actual checks and balances, because just like any 2-year-old who just keeps saying why, like he's just saying, and then what, or what, or what, and just keeps pushing the boundaries. And there's never any actual punishment or retaliation or if you storm the Capitol on January 6th and get away with it and then pardon all those people and then keep moving forward, what incentive do you have to play by the rules? I think that the Supreme Court in a lot of ways, with the, forbidding the National Guard deployed to Illinois, I think that actually helps Trump because it acts as though there still are checks and balances when there very clearly are not, right? Like when the government gets to decide who's a citizen, in terms of like taking people who are already citizens and gets to remove that, when, the president can just claim there's a national security reason why we have to pause in progress construction projects off the coast. Like we live in a dictatorship. Like that is what has happened right here. And there might be some little, niggling around the edges. And like maybe in Canada, I know I'm going ahead of the game a little bit, but all these different ways that Trump is exercising his dictatorial powers, he's getting away with it 90% of the time. And, like in Russia, Putin doesn't get literally everything he commits to. There still is occasional pushback. That doesn't mean he's not a dictator. That's just the system we live under now. And I think it behooves us to start calling it out and refuse to get caught up in these little like, oh, gosh, I hope the Supreme Court rules this certain different way. It's like, they could just not. And then what are you going to do about it? Like at the end of the day, it's of the governed. He doesn't have that consent. Like every opinion poll is clear about that. And yet he pushes forward anyway. So, it's down to the what are we going to do about it question that's on the top of my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's zoom in a little bit at some of the gifts, let's say, staying with the theme of the season. Let's behold some of the gifts a year of full-fledged Trumpism has given us, and look at some of our feature stories for this week. And we're gonna start on the international level. Let us see what old Fashy Claus has bestowed upon the world this holiday season. So, starting with Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky is traveling to Florida to meet with President Trump today as the U.S. pushes a potential Ukraine-Russia peace deal. The talks are framed as urgent and could shape negotiations before the end of the year. The core disputes are still unresolved. Ukraine wants security guarantees, clarity on reconstruction, and limits on territorial concessions in the Donbass and the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Trump is asserting control here while Russia maintains their maximalist demands. Trump says no deal matters without his approval. Putin continues to demand all of the Donbass, and diplomacy is unfolding alongside ongoing massive missile attacks on Ukraine by Russia over the holidays. Now, this is a peace deal that Trump has yet to negotiate. Let's look at one he has already negotiated, or at least takes credit for, and that is, a ceasefire in Israel to stop their bombing of Gaza. Well, turns out they actually haven't. Nearly 50 House Democrats this week urged the president to pressure Israel to stop violating the Gaza ceasefire, citing hundreds of alleged Israeli violations, mass civilian casualties, destruction of homes, and severe restrictions on humanitarian aid since the truce began. The lawmakers say Israel's response has been severe and disproportionate, pointing to airstrikes, shootings, the killing of children, and the destruction of more than 1,500 buildings, while noting Hamas violations did occur, but stressing that Israeli actions are driving catastrophic civilian harm in Gaza. They're urging Trump to use U.S. military assistance to force compliance, warning that continued violations risk collapsing the ceasefire and deepening the legal and moral crisis already facing Israel in international courts, including a genocide case against them at the International Court of Justice, as well as the International Criminal Court's arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, which the Trump administration has retaliated against with sanctions targeting ICC judges. Stick a pin in sanctioning foreign leaders you don't like. We'll be back to that momentarily. So the peace president, as he fancied himself on the campaign trail, also is continuing to pressure Denmark for rights to Greenland. The president reignited a diplomatic fight this week by appointing Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry as a special envoy to Greenland, openly repeating his claim that the U.S. has to have the island for national security and refusing to rule out the use of force. Denmark and Greenland forcefully rejected the move, with Copenhagen calling it an affront to Danish sovereignty, and Greenland's prime minister insisting the island alone decides its future, as EU leaders publicly backed Denmark. Now, as with his military and rhetorical aggression toward Venezuela, which we aren't even going to touch in this section, we're putting that to the side for now, still bombing boats in the Caribbean. Anyway, this indicates Trump is determined to gain greater control over what his recent national security strategy called the Western Hemisphere, a sphere of influence that he hopes will cover the whole of the Americas. And, the thing about these spheres of influence is that it never seems to take into account the desires of the people living within those spheres. Greenlanders overwhelmingly oppose becoming part of the U.S. Now, I don't know where Africa, a massive continent with a, ton of people living on it who have their own hopes and dreams and desires. Well, I don't know where they fall into these spheres of influence that Trump is dividing the world into with China and Russia, because the president ordered U.S. military strikes against Nigeria. There are ISIS-linked militants there. This is on Christmas Day. He claims they were targeting and killing Christians. The Pentagon confirmed the strikes were carried out jointly with Nigerian authorities. So, hey, at least we got their permission before going in there this time. Trump framed the operation explicitly as religiously motivated, warning Nigeria over an alleged existential threat to Christians and escalating rhetoric that Nigerian officials and experts say misrepresents a conflict that affects Muslims and Christians alike. Finally, in the realm of war and peace this week, and Chuck, I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this. The president announced a new Trump-class battleship as the centerpiece of a new Golden Fleet, claiming the Navy urgently needs bigger, faster, more powerful ships. The first vessel, the USS Defiant, would begin construction almost immediately and could take 2.5 years to build at a cost of $5 billion. This plan revives the battleship concept in name. I think Trump just liked to play the game as a kid, proposing massive surface combatants larger than current destroyers, potentially armed with nuclear cruise missiles, hypersonic weapons, rail guns, and directed energy systems, alongside a new class of smaller frigates. Defense experts are divided on this, with critics warning that the program prioritizes aesthetics and Trump's personal branding over real threats like China, while supporters argue these larger missile-heavy ships are needed to better defend aircraft carriers in an era of long-range and hypersonic warfare. That was a lot, but there are Chuck. Let me get your thoughts as a Navy vet, as someone who has served this country and risked their personal safety and their lives to defend this country. What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
To be honest, Scott, I have been asking myself that constantly this entire year. I mean, it used to be that the projection of military power was there to protect international shipping lanes, protecting interests in those areas, and making sure that piracy wasn't happening and those kind of things. What this is now focusing on, to me, it seems like it's anything at a whim. It's whatever catches his attention. It's kind of like, I hate to use the analogy, but kind of like whack-a-mole. Hey, this looks cool over here. Let me do this. Oh, wait a minute, I want to do this over here. I mean, wow. I mean, I'm not against anything with folks with like ADHD or something, but he looks like he's just shotting everything all over the place. Now, on the whole battleship thing, this was interesting to me because I went and I actually looked up the term, the Golden Fleet that he's mentioning is the Navy's bold investment to revitalize America's maritime industrial base, rapidly building and sustaining fleet, and fundamentally changing how we do business in order to keep projecting peace through power. Okay, I'm sorry. I think that Hegseth kind of went nuts on writing that one a little bit because, the warrior ethos and all this good stuff. But yeah. I can tell you from experience that we retired battleships over 30 years ago for a specific reason. They, for one, are too bloody big, and they are basically floating targets. Yes, they carried a lot of firepower when they could, and could support land operations and those kind of things. So to give you an idea, the ship I served on, was a guided missile cruiser, and it was enough to basically level a small country off the face of the planet if it needed to. This thing, as they're talking about it, is over 300 feet longer and 60 feet wider than the ship I served on, and carries it's supposedly going to carry another 486 people more than what my ship carried. I can tell you from a number of different things. One, this thing is just not going to be practical. If they put everything on there, I don't see how that's going to work. I just don't. So the idea that, yes, let's build bigger, badder. Okay, well, that sounds great, but in the theater of war now, when you have, dynamic environments with drones and hypersonic weapons and these kind of things, that ship will literally be a target that will not be able to defend itself against those kind of threats because it's just not nimble enough. There's just no way. So I invite everybody to go and look this up on the internet and see the size and what they're talking about with this critter, because it doesn't make any sense. Plus the price tag. That's the other part that just blows my mind. My ship cost about $1 billion to build, start to finish. This thing's $5 billion per ship. So you're building a ship for 5 times the cost to basically be a floating target. Make it make sense?
Yeah, well, yeah, take note of that $5 billion cost per ship as we get toward the end of the show and we talk about what we're not buying with our money. It reminds me, Chuck, that episode of The Simpsons where Homer designs the car. I think this is like Trump with his box of crayons gets to design the battleship himself, and they trot him out there. Okay, Papa, we'll have a press conference for you. I don't think any of this stuff's actually getting built. At least I hope not.
I would. Oh, sorry.
What happened? What happened to the peace president? I mean,
so
stopping all the wars. 8, 9, 10 wars now. Stopped all the wars.
So I put out a post recently, actually. So I was just going through the quotes, and one in particular just stands out to me. There is no way to peace. There's only peace. And that was by Mahatma Gandhi. And I personally believe that most of my military relatives, the reason that they went, the reason that they committed was for peace, right? And right now we're buddying up with some of the most unpeaceful people in the world who are doing genocides in some way, shape, or form that we are seeing in 4K. So that's not a president, whatever he looks like, and especially a president that is a descendant of immigrants, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand how any of this plays into the ethos of a strong American military or prevention force for the sake of peace.
Well, I mean, Jesse, what do you think? How does this? I guess theoretically, and I don't agree with his assessment, but if you believe in this whole spheres of influence and these world giant powers sort of dividing the world amongst themselves in the name of peace, I guess you could look at things that way. I mean, but where do the people living in these places get to decide?
Right. And specifically, where do the people living in this place get to decide? Because you could ask, I mean, many thanks to, Chuck for your service. I see Blythe is in the chat. Thank her for her service as well. There's a lot of veterans I have deep respect for. I don't want to belittle or make light of those sacrifices. And, and most Americans want a vast reduction in our military expenditures, precisely because what exactly, and Scott, you mentioned this, what exactly is at risk here? Is China going to come in and conquer the country so that now we can't have childcare providers anywhere in the state? Oh, wait, that's what's currently happening under our record economy, right? What do we have to lose from other countries taking more of the game from us? Not much, because right now we have such a small share of the pie. And all these expenditures on the military aren't turning into quality of life upgrades for us. So why should we support this? It's naked that Trump, pivots for an election and talks to the working class and says, I want to be the peace president. And, when I was in Franklin Township, standing in front of, Aaron Freeman's best supporters for 12 hours, last election day in 24, people said the economy and peace, those are the two things that they care about. They want more money in their pocket. They want less bombs falling overseas. And, that rhetoric works pretty well to voters, but that's just not what's going on. And, the one thing I'll say is it's not just because Donald Trump's a bad person. You see the same thing under Democrats a lot of times. And it's because the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about has become this self-perpetuating, self-eating machine. Ouroboros is eating its tail and, just keeps going because there's so many jobs on the line, it's too big to fail. So I think we need a bold vision, like the Green New Deal, like something like that, in order to put all these people to work, because the people working in, at Raytheon, people working, at Rolls-Royce here in Indianapolis don't necessarily just love war and they're bloodthirsty. They just need a job, and it's not their fault that this is the only jobs that are paying. So I just think we need to massively pivot our economy away from war and towards peace and infrastructure. God knows there's plenty of work to go around. So that's my rant.
Jesse,
Yeah,
I want to tag on something to that real quick. That you hit on something just a minute ago with the quality of life concept. Okay, and I want to really kind of emphasize this for a moment. So sorry to get on soapbox. Those of us that served in the military served in some of the least favorable quality of life situations you ever want to imagine. I mean, if anybody goes on base nowadays, and I can tell you this from my experiences, they're not favorable living conditions. I mean, our military members are not paid near enough to survive on a single paycheck. I can remember as an E3, I mean, I think my greatest paycheck, I think, was maybe close to $800 on a paycheck, which I was, of course, at the time I was young and didn't realize, but that doesn't go very far, especially in today's world. So when you talk about quality of life, and I agree with Jesse wholeheartedly, we need to pivot how we look at the totality of our folks that are doing these jobs that are so instrumental to protecting our country and seeing what we do, because they live in some of the on base housing is horrible. Water quality often sucks. I mean, there's just we invest all this into a whole big battleship, but we forget we forget the folks that are actually going to be operating in those environments. And I think Jesse is absolutely correct. If we invest in those things, imagine what we could accomplish. Honestly. So sorry.
Can I piggyback off you two?
Please go ahead, Tabitha.
So just watching things evolve, right? Like, we left Ukraine out in the lurch, and look at what they're doing with drone technology right now. So, whether we reinvent our way of looking at self-protection through training, a whole new generation of drone operators and advanced technology that way, versus investing in a shit ton of arms and big ships that big boys like to shoot big things with, right? And maybe also, while we're at it, we've got a backlog with the airplanes and all these problems with airplanes. Like some of us have had several conversations about, there are people that have skills that are tradesmen that would love to be a part of some big, train system. I mean,
Yeah.
They took all of our technology and went to Japan with it 40 years ago. So maybe invest in your people in a variety of ways to make their lives better all the way around.
Yeah, 100%. Let's look at a little bit more of these anti-democratic impulses here. We like to impose our will on other countries militarily in some ways, but also with our economic might or sanctions in other ways. Now, this one is scary because the Trump administration this week imposed visa bans and sanctions on certain European officials and NGO leaders involved in combating online hate and disinformation, including former EU Commissioner Thierry Breton and Center for Countering Digital Hate head Imran Ahmed, accusing them of promoting digital censorship and against American speech and tech companies. Now, this move directly targets Europe's tech regulations, especially the EU's Digital Services Act, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and other officials framing European enforcement actions against platforms like X, Meta, and Apple as coercive attacks on U.S. free expression. European governments pushed back hard, condemning the sanctions as an assault on sovereignty and democratic regulation, while analysts say the visa bans are likely a pressure tactic by Washington to undermine EU digital rules without triggering a full-scale trade war. And, it's bad enough that we're interfering with European regulators and freedom of speech, and that is concerning in its own right. But if there is one thing we value in this country, at least I thought we did, it was a free press. And we got a really disturbing development last Sunday night when Barry Weiss, the new editor-in-chief at CBS News, pulled a 60 Minutes episode investigating alleged torture and abuse at the notorious El Salvador CCOT prison, saying the segment lacked sufficient response from the Trump administration and didn't yet meet her standards for fairness. Now, this decision triggered internal revolt within CBS and public backlash, with the episode's reporter calling the move political and warning that allowing government non-response to block publication essentially gives administrations a de facto veto over inconvenient journalism. However, these people aren't terribly bright, and they didn't stop this segment from getting out. It was later broadcast via a Canadian broadcaster. This controversy sits inside a broader struggle between the administration and corporate media following Trump's lawsuit against CBS over their editing of a 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris last year, Paramount's $16 million settlement with him in that case, Weiss's appointment by Paramount's new MAGA-allied leadership, and growing concern that corporate consolidation and political pressure are reshaping editorial independence at one of America's most storied news institutions. And Tabitha, I want to start with you on this one. So, like, this CBS story is extremely disturbing. When you've got essentially hand-picked people at the helm of major news organizations, they're intentionally to spike stories that are inconvenient for the administration. Like Jesse said earlier, you're living in a dictatorship.
Well, let's just speak plainly. Most of us wouldn't be doing what we were doing if all of the media in our country had not bent a knee. So anybody that has any sort of a spine right now sees the necessity to stand up. Those trolls are crawling all over social media. You can't even put a post on TikTok or Instagram, but especially on TikTok, unless you basically are, using code to get the message out there. And all of us are just spinning through this information as fast as we can, trying to get it out to the masses, if you will, because we know damn well that all these little markets that are saturated, like where I'm from, Fox News is everywhere. And so now Fox News is coupled, like, it's basically a Christian right evangelical brainwashing service. And if this is the only media that these people are getting, and all of the other media is now bending a knee, I mean, Jesus, like 60 Minutes when I was a kid, that was as nonpartisan as you get. When those people came on, you were like, right, they have something to say. It's factual. They've done their homework. And to have these very vetted journalistic professionals crying out, hey, this is not right. We've got a whole other problem going on in this country.
And I should know, you talk about TikTok, that is now coming under the ownership of the same Ellison family that owns CBS and Paramount now. And yeah, these folks are huge MAGA sycophants, also huge pro-Israel, massive mega donors.
Speaking of pro-Israel,
yes.
You have people right now, if you go into the captions, apparently, I think it's on Meta, you can try and regulate your settings. And if you put something in there that is, say, pro-Israel, you're allowed to post it, or you're allowed to find those links. If you put anything in there for Palestine or any derivative of that, it says that it's not allowed, just as an example.
Yeah, not surprising. And so if you look at Jesse, I thought we were the people that like invented this concept of a free press and freedom of speech, and now we're basically telling it's bad enough that we don't have it anymore here, and we should not tolerate it as Americans. But now we're telling Europeans that they also can't regulate the kind of the speech that's going on in their countries. Their phrasing, if I look at this, they said, Rubio, that these European regulators are stifling American speech, and what he essentially means is far right hate speech. They are essentially saying those things are the same now. Am I out of pocket?
No, that's exactly, I think, how Stephen Miller, aka Trump's brain, would see things and say things. And I think it brings up the point that free markets, free speech, these things don't exist in a vacuum, and private industry is going to follow. It's like a liquid. It'll go to the lowest possible path, no matter what happens. And so, Paramount settles for $16 million for Trump's spurious lawsuit about the Kamala Harris interview. And so now they have this, market-based decision-making, right? Where it's like, even if Trump's wrong, it'll cost so much money to fight him that it becomes a good business decision to just do whatever Trump wants. And because They are private industries that seek profit, not, some imaginary prize for best, most transparent news. They're going to follow the path of profit, which means do what Trump wants, because that's how you make more money in America right now. And so the government does have a role. It's kind of paradoxical that the government can have a role in protecting free speech by regulating these media companies and setting up incentives and carrots and sticks that prevent people from doing this kind of nakedly partisan stuff, and encourage people to print news that people need to hear, even if people don't want to hear it, and even if the government doesn't want to hear it. Instead, we have the perverse incentives right now, and we're just prioritizing anybody who does what Trump wants. You're going to have the most favorable deals. You're going to have your mergers go through. You're going to get rich. Anybody who does what Trump doesn't want, you're going to get sued. You're going to be tied up in lawsuits. You're going to be, banned from the air over and over again, with small moves and large moves. And so, again, under capitalism, industries and firms will just follow the path of least resistance to do what makes the most money. They have to. Their shareholder, if they're publicly traded, they're legally obligated to pursue profit. And so you cannot fix this problem without starting to fix the nature of capitalism. And at least, if you're not a socialist like me, at least I think have to have some social democracy and heavy government regulation to stop this kind of stuff from happening.
And fascism is capitalism turned up to 11, right? It is unrestrained capital doing whatever it wants without any pushback. Chuck, I think it's ironic that we are trying to lecture the Germans on how much fascist speech they need to allow in their country.
Yeah, it's kind of a odd, I don't know, irony doesn't seem to really go that, it'd be the right terminology there, but it's amazing to me. I mean, where we started off from to where we are now is so diametrically different than anything I could have ever imagined. And when you're talking about regulating, when you're talking about media and regulating speech, I mean, there's a point of hindrance when you start banning certain words or certain phrases, or I'm a big Trekkie, and there's a Star Trek episode that talks about that, the first speech censored, we're all chained irrevocably. And I firmly believe that. I mean, those of us that served, like myself, I mean, freedom of speech was one of those things that just absolutely had to exist. Now, granted, in the military, there was only certain things we could say, given certain regulations, different things. But, as long as it wasn't detrimental, you were fine. But I think where the media where we went wrong in the media is when the fairness doctrine went away. And I think that, if anything, to start righting the ship, we need to bring that concept back. And we need to say that, news needs to be presented and, here's the facts, here's what's happened, let it go at that. Unfortunately, where you have, to have this point of, people watching only one media outlet, and I don't want to call it news because it's not, it's propaganda more than anything. But, a certain Fox network decides to it's basically state-run media. So they're basically taking the North Korean model and instituting it, in real time here. It's North Korea and Russia. It's kind of a weird hybrid of the two. Again, if we allow that, and this is one of the bigger keys I kind of want to hit on. If we, the people, allow this to happen, then we're sunk. And I think as we're seeing the resistance grow, with the No Kings movements, the speaking out online, great folks like us here pointing it out, calling it out for what it is, and not masking it anymore. I mean, to hit on another point, we've got to have a spine to stand up to these people, because a lot of these people that are in these positions of power are spineless. They will take whatever keeps them in power, and then that's the only thing they care about. And if that's what they care about, they're in the positions for the wrong bloody reasons.
Yeah, for the one thing that may derail these people in their pursuit of power is a good scandal. And the one that we have been following has continued to make news this week. Drip, drip, drip. We're talking about old Jeffrey Epstein, Donald's bestie for a long time, if you listen. So this week, if you recall, last week about this time, we were talking about the DOJ only partially releasing the documents related to the disgraced child trafficking financier, revealing little new information and triggering bipartisan anger after Congress had overwhelmingly passed a law requiring near total disclosure within 30 days, with only narrow exceptions to protect victims. Now, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says he plans to force a vote in the upper chamber authorizing litigation against the Department of Justice for failing to fully release the files by the legal deadline, accusing the administration of breaking the law through excessive redactions. You know, Chuck, who's going to prosecute these cases, man? Like, you're going to write a strongly worded letter? These people are not up to snuff. But regardless, pressure is building across both chambers as House members threaten contempt proceedings against Attorney General Pam Bondi, while Republicans are unlikely to back Schumer's resolution, setting up a public confrontation when the Senate returns in January. Now, staying on the Epstein story, Epstein's brother Mark accused the Trump administration of sanitizing the files, claiming that documents are being scrubbed to remove Republican names before further release. This deepens existing suspicion around the case as Mark Epstein reiterated doubts about his brother's death, and his claim echoed prior reports that references to Donald Trump were flagged inside DOJ records for potential suppression. I want to say it was Allison Gill from Mueller, she wrote, had this in like July. Said they're putting 1,000 FBI agents on overtime to find Trump's name in the files and redact them. Now, we did get a release of more documents on Tuesday. The DOJ released a new batch of files, which did contain hundreds of references to Trump, including documentation that the president flew on Epstein's private jet multiple times in the 90s. This is new information. An internal prosecutor email says Trump appeared on at least 8 Epstein flights between 1993 and 1996, including several with Epstein's convicted partner in crime, Ghislaine Maxwell, and one flight involving only Trump, Epstein, and a then 20-year-old whose name was redacted. The release included a letter allegedly written on the eve of his suicide by Epstein to former USA gymnastics doctor and fellow convicted pedophile Larry Nassar that the FBI says is fake, but can you believe anything these people say anymore? And then finally, on Wednesday, the DOJ announced it had uncovered more than 1 million additional documents related to Epstein, discovered by the FBI and federal prosecutors, and they say they plan to release these in batches over the coming weeks. Officials say lawyers are reviewing the material around the clock, claiming these delays are necessary to protect victims' identities, though, of course, critics are arguing that the law explicitly forbids redacting names solely to avoid embarrassment or reputational harm. Released documents already reference at least 10 possible Epstein co-conspirators, including internal FBI emails noting subpoenas served across multiple states, the identities of which are a central demand from victims and lawmakers alike. Jesse, what are they doing here? How are we just now finding 1 million more documents? Are the people finding too many needles and they need to add some more hay? What's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Just based on the documents that we've seen already, despite all the redaction, including some that you can just copy paste into another program to eliminate. I mean, there's ample evidence. You know, Trump has talked about going into back rooms of pageants so that he can look at the young girls and no one can kick him out. He's a pedophile. Our president is a pedophile. And he is a pedophile who's in a ring with pedophiles from all over the country and internationally. And to me, I think the last time I was on Who's Left, I brought up the point that if somebody has just a house just chock full of stuff that they don't even know where it is, they can't possibly use it or get joy from it, we call them hoarders, and we understand that as a mental health problem that they need help with. If they're doing the same thing with billions of dollars, again, you can't even spend it all on yachts, right? You're going to run out of yachts before you run out of money. That is a mental health issue, and I think it's tied into the sickness of like transgressive sex stuff, right? Where you want this thrill of power. Like there are countries where prostitution is legal, right? If you're just that lonely and desperate and have enough money, you don't need to go after children. You don't need to sex traffic people. There are ways that whether that's right or wrong, and I think wrong, But you don't have to violate the law. You don't have to do all these horrible, abusive things. You do it because you want to, and you want to because you're sick. There's something wrong with you. Our president is sick in the head and should not be in power. That's true of a lot of different politicians from both major parties, people from across the country, people from international, Prince Andrew, major tech people, major Noam Chomsky of all people, gross. There is something really wrong with a lot of the elite in this country, and I don't think we combat that by looking at each individual document to find the smoking gun. The whole machine gun array has been smoking for decades, and there's no doubt about it anymore. It's, again, just a matter of what are we going to do about
it. Tabitha, is there anything that can be produced in these documents that will finally shake people out of their stupor? We got trolls over here in the comments. Ooh, yeah, Trump. Like, I mean, what is it gonna take? Is it gonna take a picture of the man with underage girls in various states of undress for these people to finally get it, or what? And even then, are they gonna say, "Oh, that's AI"?
Well, I personally believe all of this comes back to the women, right? So why are we having such a hard time believing these women? And then go from there. So that proves that we have a really deep-seated problem with believing women in general. So we're going to believe children less. The most poor, the migrant communities, all of them are at higher risk to disappear or be involved in something like this, not by choice. So the common link, the common thread for all of these things tends to be a massive amount of money, wealth, power, influence, domestic or international collaboration through some type of industry. So we have to figure out a really creative way to put safeguards in place where the money flows, because I think we can't convince so many people right now. There's so much, religious issues in general, right? Like, to try and convince someone to have compassion for a Muslim, for example, just as a very general statement, right? Like, if you are not traveling in these circles and for whatever reason you think that it doesn't apply to you, it's really easy for people to be like, right, not my monkey, not my circus, sort of thing. And we have to convince people through regulation that seems fair to everyone unequivocally across the board, right? That is like, listen, we don't do this here. Maybe it happened in the past, right? Maybe we influence this in some way, because silence is complicity, right? So if we can at least give justice to these women, that is the start. And all of them right now just put out another ad with pictures of them as children. And they're crying and they're like, look, basically, like, this little girl deserves justice. And they've been at this for years. And I just think on both sides, they're equally as guilty. I mean, most general citizens right now, we don't care who's on the list. We don't care if it's Noam Chomsky or Bill Clinton or whoever. Like, we know that it's just scattered with a bunch of people that have money and influence that preyed on these young women. And any of these young women could have been our aunts, our sisters, our cousins, our coworkers, just normal people like us. So how do we appeal to normal people through party lines to say, listen, it doesn't matter whether you're Republican, independent, socialist, Democrat, communist, whatever, all of these children have value, and we don't do this here.
Mm-hmm.
Chuck, what do you think? Are these people ever going to see justice?
The optimist in me would like to say yes, but the pragmatic side of me says probably not anytime in the immediate future. And again, I think it comes down to, Tabitha hit it on the nose. Believing the women is absolutely the first thing, because, I mean, why isn't that enough? I don't understand. I mean, I just don't. Again, I can't get my brain wrapped around it. If this was, and I was thinking about it as some of that was being talked about, the religious aspects of it, of, you have this doctrine that's being kind of thrown around of Christian nationalism and this kind of thing. And I kind of pose the question, like, what part of all that is actually tenets of that religion? None of those people follow what Jesus actually put out. I'm saying this as a non-Christian myself, okay, but I can say that I'm probably more Christian than some of these other ones, because Jesus, what was one of the main tenets? Love everybody. Don't, treat the sick, treat the poor, treat them as you'd want to be treated. So on that, if we were to take that and spin it on its head, I say we take that and put it against those folks that are putting those things out there. These people that have violated women throughout decades should be dealt with accordingly. They should be held to account, and there should be no, there shouldn't be any resistance to that. The fact that they have this idea that as long as it doesn't affect my life, I don't care. Well, what if it does? It affects all of our lives, because if you don't prosecute these things, if you don't adhere to what the law says, it will affect your life. And I can say this, I have a daughter that I worry about constantly, because I don't want these idiots that are out there that see this collection of cells in the White House, get away with this mess. I would call it human, but I think that would degrade the entire human race. So I kind of fail to say that.
Yeah, gelatinous blob. Let's go with that. And I think you all sort of hit on this right. Is like, this is not a left-right issue. This is not a partisan issue. This is a right versus wrong issue, and it is a top versus bottom issue. And look, here's one for the trolls. We'll make you happy. We're equal opportunity around here. I don't think the Democrats get this either, that we are in a class war, and it is not time for stupid, silly, partisan crap. So let's
Scott,
look at some...
can I just say this real fast? This is just my opinion as the only female sitting on this panel, right? But how you treat your women, your children, your elderly, and your disabled is a direct reflection of the health of your society. And we are unhealthy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely well said. And so, yes, segueing in, Democrats are part of that sickness. Okay. Like we and I say we because I am a registered Democrat, and it is like being Charlie Brown and with Lucy in the football. You all know the routine. But so and this story actually came up not this last week, but the week before. We didn't get a chance to talk about it, but the Democratic National Committee has decided not to publicly release its internal 2024 election autopsy, walking back a pledge by Chair Ken Martin and signaling continued unease over revisiting how Democrats lost the White House to Donald Trump twice. The report, based on hundreds of interviews nationwide, identifies structural weaknesses, including outdated data systems, ineffective organizing metrics, losses among young voters, and defensive positioning on immigration and public safety, but avoids publicly assigning blame or naming specific campaigns or leaders or high-paid consultants. Notably absent from shared excerpts of this, not be released autopsy, is any direct reckoning with President Joe Biden's decision to run again or the late transition to Kamala Harris, deepening of frustration among Democrats who see transparency as essential while the party struggles with internal divisions and low approval ratings despite recent off-year wins. And yet, these folks have the audacity to complain when they get a primary challenger from the left, or from anywhere, frankly, as if they're entitled to their seats. This article from CNN, they're attacking their own. A surge of progressive primary challengers is rattling certain House Democrats, highlighted by Dan Goldman, facing a serious challenge for Brad Lander in New York, as younger and more left-wing candidates argue incumbents haven't fought hard against Donald Trump. Party leaders and incumbents are openly annoyed, warning that left-wing primaries waste money, time, and focus that should be aimed at flipping competitive seats, with several Democrats calling the insurgent challenges dumb, self-indulgent, or internet-driven. These fights expose a deeper Democratic identity crisis as progressives push a "did you fight or didn't you fight" message while establishment leaders insist unity and protecting incumbents is the fastest path back to a House majority, even as challengers continue to outrace sitting members in some deep blue districts. And furthermore, the out of touch ness, as it were, is exemplified by an NBC News piece talking about a surge of politicians' kids running for office. So as veteran lawmakers retire, a wave of political relatives are running in 2026, with high-profile examples across both parties, including children, siblings, and relatives of current and former members of Congress, governors, and presidents. Now, they mentioned a Republican or two in this article, but mostly Democrats are profiled, and, you know, you don't have to point too far in the state of Indiana to find examples of this. I will not go any further. But these political family ties, they offer advantages, but also real risks. You know, you got the instant name recognition and fundraising access, while also exposing candidates to accusations of nepotism and backlash amid strong anti-establishment sentiment among voters. You know, many of these political scions are trying to distinguish themselves from their famous relatives, sometimes publicly breaking with them on policy or strategy, as they argue that it's elections, it's voters, not lineage, ultimately determining legitimacy in this more skeptical and volatile environment. And I would like to point out something my favorite Hoosier author, Jared Yates Sexton, wrote on his Substack this morning, or not this morning, but earlier this week. And I don't care who you are or where you came from or what your name is, but every person, and I'm quoting Sexton now verbatim, every person running for office in either 2026 or 2028, if there are even elections, needs to do a few things. They need to call for the abolishment of ICE. They need to make reform a central plank in their platform. They must call for taxation of the wealth class that has tried to destroy democracy and an end to historic inequality, reestablishment of voting protections and civil liberties, and they must wholeheartedly and full-throatedly promise to hold these criminals accountable. End quote. I don't know if I see that in enough of the Democrats that we referenced up above earlier. Chuck, let me come back to you. So they said that where's the word I'm looking for here? See, there's a strong anti-establishment mood right now. Like, I think generally being a legacy is a negative. It is a hit. It is, your family has been part of causing this problem. Do you think being legacy is disqualifying, a handicap, or a plus?
I guess I'll start off with an answer of yes to most of that. I mean, it depends. So I want to drill back to kind of a more local side of this, that in local politics, name recognition carries a lot. I know in our local area, there are certain names that are just instantly recognizable, and they associate that to, hey, that was a good idea, so they just go with it. The problem with that is that, like you point out, if they made poor decisions or had problems or scandals or this, that, or the other thing, it sometimes gets carried and then sometimes it doesn't. It really depends on, what the times are, I guess, in some regard. I would advocate that name recognition shouldn't carry any inherent guarantee of success. As I've said numerous times to all the candidates and everybody I talk to, vote for the person. Take out the equation of party, take out the equation of what their family relationship is. Look at the individual and judge them by what they do, not what they say, because their actions will tell you who they are. There are some folks that by their actions, they are inherently less than optimal for a position. I'm sorry, I'm trying to be a little bit diplomatic in how I'm phrasing things. There are others that you hear a name and you say, oh my dear God, heck no. There are those. And then on the flip side, there are some that if they lived up to the positive side of a legacy, maybe fully worth it. But again, you can't judge it just on the name of the person or what you think they are. You've got to research the person. And in the other part, there's another side to that. As I also would say, don't discount grassroots folks. There is a true desire to see, the folks that live this stuff every bloody day without the benefit of a huge bank account or family institutional money or any of that kind of thing. I mean, those folks, to me, are actually probably more interesting than the ones that have been around for a while.
Yeah. So I found the quote I was looking for that I was going to throw to you, Chuck, but I'm going to throw it to you, Tabitha. So the fastest path back to a House majority, right? Unity and protecting incumbents is the fastest path to a House majority. It's the way to win, right? And they always we talk about, well, you got to win first. Okay, to what end, right? Like, we want to win. We want to depose the Republicans that are currently in power, but to what end? To serve whom? That's the vision I'm not seeing. Are you seeing it?
Well, I think there's a hell of a lot of gatekeeping going on. And I think especially Hoosiers, like you saw a lot from Hoosiers with the redistricting battle, right? Some of these legislators surprised me, actually. I was like, oh, you've got a backbone. I'm kind of like surprised by that. And I was happy to see that because the way I was raised here was very much what Chuck said, right? Like, you were always encouraged to vote for the person. And now that I'm a parent, I've taken all those lessons that I've learned from my family as I've gone along. And I'm trying to think, like, how can I best, be a role model for my nieces and nephews and my kids, for example. And I always go back to things that my grandpa used to say. And he always used to say things like Chuck said, watch what they do, not what they say. Watch the ways that they give back to their community. And I think there are candidates out there right now really hitting the pavement. And I'll go farther with that too. What I want to see and the type of person that I'm going to vote for 100% of the time is going to have some sort of a backstory, even if it's a little muddy, right? Like, there's going to be some type of grit in there, some self-determination towards a greater good. And that's not self-serving, right? And I think that it can look a lot of different ways. But what I would like to see are a bunch of like single moms that had been on WIC, union workers, just like very much the blood of the people sort of people that are leading in their communities, are doing the community service, that came out early and hot with the protest stuff, right? Like, I want to see people that were at the early protests. We're talking January and February, that saw the red alarm bells right away and have consistently along the way just trudged that line when it was murky and dangerous. Like, these are the type of people that I want to see in office. And I couldn't give a goddamn, honestly, like what your hair looks like, what shoes you wear, what lineage you came from. I just don't care. Like, I don't think those people accurately represent the struggles of the populace. And I think that both parties are like missing the forest for the trees here, because normal people that are sitting around their dining room tables having conversations about these people, they're saying the same things that we're saying. They may not be saying it out loud, but they're saying it.
Yeah. Yeah. Jesse, what do you think is in this autopsy that they don't want to get out?
There's a battle happening right now, and the battle is for the soul, if there still is one, of the Democratic Party. And we have people like Blythe Potter. We have people who are exactly the folks that Tabitha just mentioned, the people who are just rank and file, regular ass people, just normal folks who see what's going on in this country and are willing to commit a bunch of personal sacrifice in order to try to put it in the right track. And, then we have people who, just like snap their fingers and receive the $500,000 from out-of-state billionaire donors and think that they could marginally improve things based on how far to the right that the status quo has gone. And, there's a commonly known among socialists anyway, ratchet effect, right? Where Republicans pull things to the right, Democrats move things a little bit moderately to the left, Republicans pull things further to the right, Democrats move things moderately to the left. But you look at, like ever since Clinton killed welfare in the 90s, ended welfare as we know it, we've been moving into this right-wing dystopia ever since. And why is it in my benefit if the Democrats control the House, if these Democrats are people who want a continuation of this bizarre historical aberration that the current right-wing system is? This is not normal. This is not in my best interest. It's not in my neighbor's best interest. So if you're not, I don't care what your party is. I can't imagine a Republican ever, pushing for the things that I want. But no matter what, little letter next to your name on the ballot is, I want to see you. I think Jared Yates Sexton put it well. We need to be absolutely jailing the people who did this. I mean, we need Nuremberg trials, and I'm not kidding. Like we need people to be thrown in prison for life, for what has happened here. There's just been flagrant, intentional disregard for the rule of law, and people have died from it. So many people have been immiserated, but in the mid 2020s, after the pandemic relief went away, Democrats oversaw the largest increase in poverty in my lifetime by just cutting those programs. And Democrats were full-throated in cutting them. It wasn't like this losing battle where we're fighting against the Republicans. They were on the side of big capital who cared more about corporate profits than they did child poverty. And those people are not in my party. I'm a lifelong Democrat. I've never voted for another party in my life. I'm an elected Democrat. And those people, I don't want in the party with me. I want to shrink the tent, because as long as we keep these kind of traitors and backstabbers in our party, why would anyone vote for us? You look at the opinion polls and you look at the support ratings for Democrats, it's in the toilet, and it deserves to be, because we have people within this party who are Trump's biggest enablers and who are just normalizing and accommodating this fascism. And I want them out. I want them gone today.
I would
Go ahead, Chuck.
Sorry, I hear what you're saying on the tent thing, but there's a cautionary tale I'd throw at that too. I would say we need to keep the tent size, but guard the tent carefully, because we need to make sure we have the right people for the right time to meet the need where it is. And if we don't have those folks, those candidates meeting the need where the voters need us to be, then yeah, we're not, we don't deserve to be voted for. But if we have the right people in the right places, then we can say, hey, we got somebody to run for it. Does that make sense?
I feel what you're saying, Chuck. I like the big tent. It matters who the ringmaster is in the circus, right?
Well,
if you got the wrong ringmaster, you're welcome to the tent. There's some seats in back. It's time for a new ringleader, though. Tabitha, you were going to say something.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, this is getting a lot of heat right now, but I'm a supporter of it. So there's sort of this rebirth of the matriarchy happening, and there are more women stepping forward. And I think there needs to be, because, women do actually protect everybody, because we're mothers and sisters and all that sort of thing, especially mothers or, caretakers within the disability community. They are seeing a totally different thing still than what everyone else is seeing, right? So if the attack is against the least of those, if you will, these people are like red hot on the issues, and they really see the danger flares, right? So for me, I'm going to be digging deep into the money, because I think if you follow the money, it tells you everything. So, doesn't matter, like Jesse was saying, Republican, Democrat, Independent. If you can track and see, oh, this person's gotten 500,000, $1 million from this person, like, who are they beholden to? Are they beholden to the people or the corporation or the person that gave them that money? I mean, I just think it's just very, very clear to people, and they don't want that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to clarify one comment I made. Yes, I said shrink the big tent, but that's shrink this very large elite access only gate to the tent, right? Because the tent can only be so big. There are only so many seats in the state house and the city council and Congress. And while all of them are being held in reserve for rich white guys, then the people that Tabitha just mentioned, how many disabled people do we have in Congress? How many people of color? How many indigenous people? How many immigrants, right? Immigrants represent a pretty large share of our society. We should have a pretty large share of immigrants in our Congress. How many people working blue collar jobs? right? So when I say shrink the Big Ten, I mean specifically stop giving them the all access VIP pass that lets them into the tent first, right?
No,
That's
yeah.
what I'm saying.
100%.
Yeah,
I mean, look,
100%.
100%. And again, Tabitha hit on something very vital to me. And I've said this many times, and I've caught in flack for it a little bit, that I agree. We need to have more women in leadership positions. Absolutely. And we need to have people in leadership positions that actually represent who we are as a people of our country and of our county, of our cities. We've got to have the inclusiveness and I know, the Republicans have torn up the idea of diversity, but we are a diverse community. We are the living embodiment of the term diversity, but we need it in our representation that are making these decisions. And we need to hold those ones that have been in there forever and a year. I'm sorry, they need to go. They need to get out of the way and let those of us that have better ideas or have more energy for it or have the spine, as Tabitha points out, which I absolutely love, need that energy in there right now. Absolutely.
Yeah, so a lot to say there. This conversation will continue throughout into 2026. I am sure of it. I did just want to say, in regards to Jesse and the ratchet effect, it is real, and it is, as the kids say, ratchet. Let us move on and zoom in on Indiana here. Let us look at what we talked about the gifts a year of Trumpism has bestowed upon the world and the country. Let us look at what jolly old Saint Nicholas has brought to Indiana in 2025. So now we did receive some recognition this week. The Washington Post naming Indiana their State of the Year for all the wrong reasons. And let me read here. So this op-ed openly celebrates a sort of pre-MAGA Republican orthodoxy, low taxes, deregulation, weakened unions, school privatization, zoning rollbacks, and austerity, presenting these kind of policies as responsible governance, while ignoring that this exact governing model dominated Republican politics for 30 to 40 years and directly produced the economic inequality, institutional decay, and public rage that made MAGA inevitable. We had this honor bestowed upon us for basically doing all of those typically generic Republican things, but, resisting Trump procedurally, right? Pushing back symbolically in this gerrymandering scheme. Again, while still embracing all of his policy substance, refusal to, use of universal school vouchers, charter expansion, spending cuts, all these policies that hollow out public institutions and feed the people's wealth to private interests. I think the article's core argument is essentially historical amnesia. It treats MAGA as a deviation caused by a personality, right? By the one great man and his tone, rather than as the logical outcome of decades of pro-business, anti-regulatory governance that strips states like Indiana of our capacity to do things and undermine democracy and convince millions of people that government works only for the wealthy. And hey, guess what? They're right. And MAGA claims to push back on this, but they also just work for the wealthy. Did you guys see this? Tabitha, did you see this WAPO article? Like, I think it is typical Amazon Jeff Bezos slop. Call me wrong.
Honestly, I barely even read like traditional news anymore. I just don't, because I think it's all bullshit. And I don't want to hear from any of these rich people that are using their money and opinions and influence to try and like put a worm in the ear of all my friends and neighbors. Like, I'm looking for these boots on the ground experiences, and that's where I get my news. So no, I didn't like read it.
Well, let me tell you. You didn't
Tell
miss
me about
anything. I mean, Jesse, you saw this when Bezos and the Washington Post made their pivot after the last Trump win. Whatever happened to democracy dies in darkness. Instead, they threw that out the window, and they're like, we're gonna focus on pro-market small tax, anti-regulatory stuff, and that's going to be the opinion of their editorials. And well, I mean, they told the truth, I guess. What'd you think of this article? Indiana, state of the year? Woohoo!
Yeah, no. And for exactly the reasons that you mentioned, right? So, Trump talked about draining the swamp, right? And that was supposed to be how he, pivoted, and how he, claimed to be different from the past. But he is very much a swamp creature. And it's that same miasma of swamp vapors that continues to be exuded throughout his, entire regime. And so, yes, this time, state senators decided not to totally bow to Trump while Trump's minions were like threatening their families with death threats and bombs. Yay for them, I guess. But that has nothing to do with whether this state is moving in the right direction, whether that's helping, families, helping working people. I was just reading the Fair Housing Center of Central Indiana's report that showed housing costs have gone up over 50% since 2019 in Marion County. Nobody I know's wages have gone up 50% since then. So that means fewer people are able to remain in homes in our capital city. How is that anything to be praised, right? Like in the richest country that's ever existed on the face of the planet, we can't manage to let working people have a safe place to lay their head. What could be a more damning indictment of our society, right? Like we are not doing well. We should not be praised for this. And it's all choices that we could just choose to do differently.
Yeah. Chuck, they basically are arguing for MAGA without the rough edges, right? They're like, "Hey, can you at least not say the quiet part out loud?" That's what I'm getting out of this.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Jesse that we are highlighted for all the bloody wrong reasons. Because I mean, yes, while we stood up to the quiet, or they want the quiet MAGA, because that's exactly what they have in the State House right now. If you look at the legislation that has been introduced right now for this legislative session, it continues the same themes, just quietly. They're trying to sneak under the radar like they do with just about everything. And so, Indiana, while we have a great college sports team, we suck in about every other measurable metric that I can see. And the only way we're going to change that is by people getting out and saying, enough's enough. Get the right folks in gear. I'd love to see somebody go up and challenge every and this is something we're focusing on here in our county, that we want to see every race challenged. We want to get everybody in there to present a challenge. I mean, even if we don't win, we still need to challenge them, because those ideas need to be out there, and people need to know that there are choices to be made. MAGA is not new. It's just a resurgence of what has happened years and years ago. It's just, unfortunately, we've forgotten our history because they've killed the educational system enough to where we don't remember these things, at least en masse anyway. So
every 4 generations, like clockwork, man, those cockroaches keep popping their heads out from under rocks, and we're like, oh, it's fine this time. They've learned their lessons. No, they never learn their lessons. And look what happens when you don't learn your lessons. You get the kind of things going on in Indiana, and I'm going to give you guys a fire hose of terrible stories. So first, an Indianapolis man believes ICE wrongfully detained his husband. Eleazar Sanchez Ayala was stopped by the Indiana State Police on I-70 for an alleged speeding violation the other day, despite having a valid driver's license, work permit, social security number, and, only 2 resolved speeding tickets on his record. Federal immigration agents arrived and detained him, though neither state police nor ICE have explained why he was targeted or who initiated the feds' involvement. Sanchez Ayala was moved through multiple detention facilities in Indiana and Kentucky, spent days effectively disappeared from public systems, and still, at the time I wrote this, did not appear in ICE's online detainee locator, a system that normally updates within 48 hours. His husband, Isaac Reeves, spent days calling jails and detention centers just to locate him, while Sanchez Ayala remains jailed without access to even a public defender, forcing the family to fundraise privately for legal representation. this case illustrates how intensified immigration enforcement can ensnare long-term residents with legal work authorization, separating families without transparency, clear charges, or meaningful due process, even in states like Indiana, where, local police are theoretically cooperating with ICE and they could do things, by the book. But again, here come the feds, just big dicking locals and taking this guy God knows where. And, in the Indiana that the Washington Post envisions, right? Like, is this still going on? Are we still doing these things? Or would they not even let these two men who, obviously love each other very much get married? Like, I only see them winding the clock backwards. For example, here's another example of this. Down in southern Indiana, you recall, there was a bit of an AIDS crisis a couple years ago because of used needles. So a July executive order from Trump cut off federal funding for key harm reduction supplies, forcing syringe exchange programs like that one to halt, or to destroy items like cookers and tourniquets, despite decades of evidence showing that these tools reduce disease and save lives. In Clark County, health officials are boxing up supplies that had been bought with federal money previously, marked do not use, and they're scrambling to keep these programs alive now with private money, as Indiana's syringe exchange law is set to expire next year. A dangerous echo of the HIV catastrophe that struck nearby Austin. In Scott County, the data from these communities is consistent. Indiana exchanges have reversed nearly 25,000 overdoses statewide, cut HIV and hepatitis C transmission roughly in half, and returned over 90% of used syringes, while Scott County's HIV rates plummeted after exchanges were introduced and remained low until the program ended. So, these programs are saving lives, but Trump and Republicans are cutting them. What happened to the pro-life party? And, listen, they don't want you to put drugs in your body. They don't want you to poison yourself, but they will gladly poison you, or at least let their corporate donors do so. This week, the Department of Energy ordered 2 aging Indiana coal plants to stay online for at least 90 more days, blocking their planned retirement and citing rising electricity demand from AI data centers and concerns about grid reliability. This move fits a broader push by Trump to prop up coal using emergency powers under the Federal Power Act that critics say are meant for true crises, not to override long-term energy transition plans approved by utilities, regulators, and grid operators. Environmental and consumer advocates are warning the orders are legally dubious and costly, arguing there is no real grid emergency, although, taking all that wind power offline or keeping it from going online certainly doesn't help. They point to similar federal interventions elsewhere that have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars per day to keep these uneconomic coal plants running. Uneconomic for us, certainly economically beneficial, again, for the Trump donors, the fossil fuel oligarchs. Continuing to look at the benefits, as it were, of Trumpism here in Indiana. State lawmakers are weighing whether to conform to Trump's new federal tax cuts, a move that Governor Braun's administration estimates could cost the state more than $900 million over 2 years if adopted in full. Nice thing of Trump to propose these tax cuts and then, put it on the states to actually implement them. The federal changes include tax breaks for tips, overtime pay, vehicle loan interest, and major business deductions, delivering hundreds of millions in taxpayer savings. Usually the highest taxpayers, the wealthiest taxpayers, benefit from these savings, but also shrinking Indiana's tax base, even as the state projects ballooning cash reserves by 2027. Stick a pin in that. We're going to come back to that momentarily. Democrats and tax policy analysts warn these cuts skew toward wealthier earners and threaten core priorities, arguing Indiana should instead protect Medicaid funding, expand child care assistance, and reduce regressive sales taxes rather than rush to mirror these Trump tax policies. But hey, like, life sucks. They're rounding up our neighbors. They're poisoning our air and our water. They're getting rid of harm reduction programs. But hey, at least the state budget is going to run a surplus. The Indiana revenue picture has flipped dramatically from earlier this year, with updated forecasts now projecting tax collections strong enough to push state cash reserves to nearly $5 billion by mid-2027. This is more than double earlier estimates and well above the 10 to 15% cushion lawmakers usually target. Republican leaders, of course, are downplaying this windfall and resisting new spending, with Governor Braun framing the surplus as proof that his tax cuts are working and signaling caution despite the much rosier outlook. Democrats argue, meanwhile, that the surplus should reverse earlier budget cuts, saying lawmakers were spooked by a bleak spring forecast and now have an obligation to reinvest in programs serving children and seniors and people with disabilities and other vulnerable Hoosiers. And we will look a little more in depth at certain vulnerable Hoosiers who are particularly harmed by that here momentarily. Now, Tabitha, if we have this $5 billion surplus, apparently, by 2027, that tells me that we're not spending enough on public services. I mean, am I wrong?
I don't think you're wrong. I straddle a lot of interesting communities, and this is where I think that I can be really objective in some areas. I do think that Hoosiers at the core really want to help their neighbors, and we just have to pick the things that are most valuable to us, like collectively. And I would say, protecting water rights, protecting clean water, that should be at the top, because that affects the farmers, the hunters, the fishermen, like everybody. If we don't have clean water, then we can't do good things. We can't be healthy people, right? So clean water, clean air. Nobody's saying that, somebody has this magic solution to make all of this stuff happen, like boom, right now. But we have to decide what our objectives are and then decide how we're going to divvy up that money. And it cannot be moving forward corporately motivated, right? Like, we can't say, right here, we want to attract all these businesses to come into Indiana, flatten all this farm ground, poison the water or whatever for the residents for the next 50, 60, 100 years. And then claim that we are Hoosier-based, family-based, religiously based, or whatever. I don't know. I just think we have to demand from these politicians that their policies are very clear and demand how they serve their community. And from there, right, then we can have a really clear picture of what that budget looks like. Because I think, most Hoosiers, there's a lot of poor people here, but they can all balance a checkbook. They're not stupid, like, they've seen all their grocery prices go through the roof. They've seen their energy prices go through the roof. They're pissed off, and rightfully so. And then you have these people on a hill, Washington, D.C. or Indianapolis, pick one, talking down to them, demanding loyalty and fealty, when they're like, right, we gave you a chance. And, if we were in a business relationship, we'd fire you or we'd leave because you're not serving us,
Yeah. Jesse, I'm going to ask you the same thing. Like, a budget surplus beyond what you would need for an absolute rainy day situation means you're doing something wrong, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think even Republicans would agree that a budget surplus is a bad thing, because the state shouldn't be taking more of your hard-earned money than it absolutely needs to keep the lights on. The issue, of course, is who is paying taxes, who's not, who's benefiting from the government services, and who's not, right? And so we're increasingly taxing the poor to give services to the rich, and that is happening at every level, from the smallest to the greatest. And I wanted to quickly, my buddy Will is watching, and he would be really mad if I didn't take the opportunity to talk about data centers, right? He and I have been both fighting. He's been to a lot of the Decatur Township meetings here in Indianapolis and in Martindale Brightwood. There's like all over in Indianapolis, as well as in most of the rural state, people are up in arms and they hate data centers. Tabitha mentioned earlier, yes, they also hate wind and solar farms that are plants that are taking over farmland. But data centers in particular, unlike those others, tend to raise their rates, right? Raise your electric rates, cause you more harm. And so I just wanted to point out, this is Donald Trump taking the side of the data centers and saying their existence, which didn't, it's brand new. 5 years ago, no one was talking about this brand new industry that is owned and operated by the same tech giants that we all justifiably hate, has the right to poison your kids, and you're not allowed to say anything about it. Because if you look up, especially asthma rates and cancer rates near coal-fired plants, cleanest coal in the world, you're still seeing a asthma rate, last I checked, in southern Indiana near coal plants was 7 times the rate up in Marion County. And it's not like we don't have industry in Marion County, right? It's specifically the coal. So again, we're poisoning your children so that people can also raise your electric rates. And that is the government forcing that to happen. This isn't like free market. This isn't just what people want. The consent of the government is totally gone here. We're just absolutely, the government is hand in hand with the tech oligarchs that are just trying to addict us all to social media and their Gemini AI bullshit. We can argue about that later. But it's not in any of our best interests. It's only in Jeff Bezos, Zuckerberg. There's like 5 tech oligarchs who are controlling all of this. We have to fight back, and all of us on all sides of the political spectrum should agree on that issue at least.
Yeah, and well, along those lines, Chuck, I remember when the tech industry used to be sort of vaguely left-coded, and Obama came up in 2008, sort of cozy with tech, or at least it seemed that way, because he was basically the first candidate to know how to use social media. And there was a sort of symbiotic relationship as the tech industry grew during his administration. But yet now you see who these folks really are. Like Jesse said, capitalism always finds the lowest place to go. And in bed with the fossil fuel industry is where they are, because they need energy now. They need to fuel their data centers now. They want to build generative AI. They want to build Skynet now. What happened to our beneficent tech overlords who would guide us to the clean economy of the future?
Fair question. Because I remember when President Obama in his run-up was talking about, there was this ongoing debate of green jobs that were going to come in under his plans and those kind of things. And for a lot of it kind of did. But I think what happened was there was this revolt because the oligarchs that were in power at that time kind of saw their grip fading. And they saw that, hey, I can't control this as well as I used to. So they started working behind the scenes. And sorry, my brain's going on 3 different tangents, so I got to try and select one and stay on it. Because there was just so many points I want to touch on. But
AI ruined your brain, Chuck. Blame them.
Probably more than I realize, I'm sure. But I guess I'll look at it from a water resource standpoint, because that's my bread and butter. That's where I've lived for the last 20 years. That Jesse's right that these data centers are absolutely unnecessary, and they are one of the prime drivers of environmental damage right now. The need for the water supply is just crazy in the certain light of that we're making investments for that LEAP district right now. They're just insane. You're talking 10 million gallons a day, which is more than the city of Greenfield uses almost in a year. Okay. I mean, it's freaking crazy. So when you talk about resource management and the idea that tech can be a partner, and it can, if you do it the right way with the right investment strategies. Solar panels in farm fields, absolutely wrong direction. Could we put solar panels over the top of every parking structure in downtown Indianapolis? Hell yes. And guess what? Wow, we would have a power abundance to no end. To that same point, with the state having that abundance of funds, this is the same that's being done in certain local municipalities, that they squirrel away money, sometimes unbeknownst to the general public, and then what do they do with it? It just either sits there collecting dust, or it gets spent on things that are rather questionable. So the question that we really have to ask ourselves is, what are our priorities? Do we want to have a society that can have our resources, have clean drinking water, have clean waterways and streams, that, cleaning up the White River? That was a big focus for a long time. And now the White River is more healthy than it has been in years past, because that investment was made to make those things happen. We can do that everywhere else if we get past the ideological constraints. We get past some of this stupidity that has pervaded us. Clean water is not a right, left, anything else. I mean, that is a human need, just like housing. Having sanitary living conditions. That's why we have wastewater treatment. That's why we have drinking water systems, to provide a healthy environment for our communities. But now we need to focus on clean soil, clean air, looking at emission standards, which the Trump regime is trying to get rid of. The EPA, the current EPA is just a fragment of its what it was its intention. I mean, the Clean Air Act, is being literally torn apart left, right, and sideways because of these data centers, because they use diesel generators that create all the pollutants in the air. And Jesse's right. The impact on human health of these things is we don't see it right now, but we will see it dramatically in 5 or 10 years, when these things go belly up and they're just going to be these husks of buildings just sitting there collecting dust, because they're only going to be viable for 10 years, maybe. I'm being maybe a little generous. So we have to center our priorities. And I agree with Tabitha wholeheartedly. If we choose as a society to survive and thrive, then we start making the right decisions. Right now, that's not happening.
No, it's not. And this here, what we're talking about, we're sicker, we're more polluted, we're more addicted, our neighbors are getting rounded up. These are the gifts of Trumpism that old Ku Klux Kringle has bestowed upon Indiana for the holiday season. Do you feel free yet? But hey, at least we have that bonus, that surplus, right? Along those lines, I want to get to our last story here. So this surplus is largely going to be built on the back of Medicaid costs, which are projected to grow more slowly than expected, largely because enrollment has dropped by about 15% after the state increased income verification checks. But hoops that people that probably actually need this are falling through, just because it's an extra hoop to jump through. This reduced coverage mostly among healthier recipients, but not overall. Despite this improved fiscal picture, the state is moving ahead with these cost-cutting measures, including a planned 10% cut to Medicaid reimbursement rates for autism-related ABA therapy, affecting more than 8,000 children and young adults, even as overall state reserves swell. So we saw FSSA, that's the Social Services Administration here in Indiana, announce a 10% cut to most Medicaid reimbursement rates for behavioral autism therapy, arguing the current rates are unsustainably high and could push spending toward $800 million, even as officials insist the new rates will remain above national and regional averages. These officials say the cuts are meant to improve quality and rein in excess providers, but comments from agency leadership suggest the policy may deliberately thin the provider field, raising alarms among lawmakers and therapists about access, especially out in the rural areas, right? Providers warn the cuts will shut down small local clinics and worsen wait lists for families, with at least one rural autism center already closing, and others saying children may be forced to travel long distances or lose services entirely when this change takes effect. I've also included in the show notes a link to an NPR article talking about ABA autism therapy and why it's the gold standard in autism care. Indiana is not the only state to be reckoning with an increase in the budget for ABA therapy. I will reference you to that NPR article for that for right now. Now, staying on the subject, however, of caring for our children, there is another group talking about using tax referendums to fund childcare. The Indiana childcare crisis is universally acknowledged but unresolved. The state is ranked worst in the nation for childcare access. More than 30,000 families are stuck on a voucher wait list, and providers are able to serve only about 60% of the children who need care as centers are continuing to close. Lawmakers are reluctant to add spending, again, even despite this supposed surplus. And especially with a short legislative session this year, they're probably not going to tackle this issue. Well, some advocates are floating a local workaround, a referendum model that would let communities raise property taxes to fund preschool, an idea pitched as flexible but criticized as creating uneven access. Again, it's the same way we fund our public schools now. You see the wealthy communities that have a larger tax base to draw from get the goods, while people who need these services, regardless, in less privileged areas, are left out in the cold. These are services that should be provided, and you get a better bang for your buck, frankly, if you're paying for things at the state or federal level than if you are just, it's like insurance, smaller risk pool versus larger risk pool. And also in education and child rearing news this week, a profile on Chalkbeat talks about the local IPS fiasco where Joe Hogsett and a bunch of charter school monsters basically have voted to take over Indianapolis public schools. They're on the brink of basically being stripped of any democratic governance. This is driven by desegregation era enrollment collapse, charter expansion backed by Democrats and Republicans alike, and repeated financial blows that steadily stripped IPS of students and money and political leverage. ILEA was the name of the state-mandated group headed by Mayor Hogsett. This task force recommends replacing the elected school board with a mayor-appointed structure overseeing both IPS and charters. And, we were talking earlier in the show about Democrats that do or don't get it. One of those charter-supporting Democrats in Indianapolis is Maggie Lewis, who sits on the City County Council with Jesse. Well, she also sits on the board of the Mind Trust, a charter school advocacy nonprofit that is deeply involved with this whole ILEA mess. Maggie Lewis is set to become the president of the City County Council once again after the current president, Vop Osili, announced he will step down from leadership going into the next year. Her return to the presidency, this is not her first time, sets up renewed tension between council leadership and public school, labor, and civil rights advocates, especially as backlash grows over this proposal to take over the IPS school board. Mirror Indy, however, has a profile on IPS parents and other groups who are not giving up. They are taking this fight to the State House. Stay tuned for more on that as we go further. Only got about 12 minutes here left, so I want to make sure we get some discussion on these in, but I do want to go fast now. Jesse, this is your department. This is your purview. Here, speaking of the City County Council and IPS and all that mess, I don't know how much you can comment, but I will turn the floor over you to comment as much as you are comfortable commenting.
Oh, yeah, I am comfortable commenting, but I've got more than 12 minutes of content, so I'll try to be respectful to other guests and other co-hosts here. So the one thing I'll say, yes, I've known that Maggie Lewis was going to be elected president for a couple months now when a Republican colleague on the City County Council let me know that those decisions had been made. That's right. I am an elected Democrat, but the Democratic caucus that expelled me sees fit to work with Republicans, including far-right Republicans like the person who reached out to me, rather than work with somebody who's elected on their same ballot line who is pushing for public education. Maggie Lewis was the one who initiated the expulsion procedures against me, specifically because I called her out for attacking public schools. And now she's seeing fit to gain more power to keep me further marginalized and keep my district further from fair representation. As a reminder, Maggie is one of the people with Vop Osili who, there are 3 votes, those are 2 of them, who decide committee assignments. I have 3 committees. Every single Republican on the Indianapolis City County Council has 6. So when we had some of the trolls talking about the Uniparty, that's a conspiracy theory that I actually believe in very wholeheartedly. Republicans and Democrats are working together to kill public education, to give Republicans more political power than they've actually earned through elections. And they're getting apparently nothing from it, except for record police budgets, again, destroying public schools, destroying representation. They absolutely are. Destiny Wells just put out a really interesting blog post. Go look for The Good Fight. She probably wouldn't endorse everything I say here, and I don't endorse everything she says, but it's an interesting read. And it talks about how the Marion County Democratic Party is the reason she didn't win the Secretary of State's race in 2022. We don't turn out voters. We don't knock on doors. This is one area where they do keep the tent very small in order to protect these privileged elite few who are running contrary to the party platform to the detriment of everybody who lives here. It's seriously a gigantic problem. The whole state will be held back until we hold these people accountable. When we have a predatory, corrupt mayor, predator, corrupt mayor, and an incoming city council president who announces the result of a vote that has not actually happened until January 5th. They just have so little care for what actually matters in terms of democracy, representation, and talking to the people. Again, I could go on for another 9 minutes easily, but I'll shut up there. Follow me on social media, and I'll be saying a lot more about this very soon.
Very good. Tabitha, I wanted to touch on this, these cuts to the autism therapy. This is your lane. You are an autism advocate. This is what you talk about on your podcast. What does this actually look like in real people's lives, these cuts?
Well, I use my family as an example. So I've got 3 little kids with autism. They're all level 3. One of them uses an AAC device. All 3 of them, I was lucky enough to get in the same ABA school. So at least I was just taking them to one location. Now they haven't decided whether they're going to make things retroactive or not, but all of the schools are in a panic. Like all the ABA centers are in a panic. They had already, in advance of these directives coming out, started to reduce hours, hoping they could basically placate the higher ups and that they would leave these kids alone and not make drastic changes. 2 out of the 3 of my children are going to be rotating into public school soon, which I'm terrified about because I know that they're making a ton of cuts to the public school system. I don't think that they're going to have adequate safeguards in place to make sure that they get the type of education that they need through their IEP. I don't think that they're going to have the extra staff available and knowledgeable. They're definitely not going to have a one-to-one. I'm not mad at the public school system for it. I recognize that they don't have what they need. But from a parent perspective, right? Before a lot of the charter school stuff had really hit, I had already put my kids on a charter school waiting list because it was right, what are my options? What are good? What are bad? And my children do really well with the outdoors. And I'm a single mom too, right? So I was like, okay, where can I put these children where they will succeed? Because I don't want them to go backward. Most of my children have had some type of either language regression or behavioral need. So I'm just really, really worried that they will regress. And if they regress, a regression in autistic children looks different than a regression in other children. And they may actually lose their speech, lose those social skills. And so I've just been beating this drum ever since they brought RFK to Indianapolis and was like, hey, look at me. I was like, uh-oh, this is bad. Because, our state has a really bad history with institutionalization and eugenics and all of that. It always seems like Indiana just raises their hand and hey, pick me, let's do the most horrible shit possible. And so being that I am part of the autism community myself, even as a late diagnosed high masking female, right? I don't feel that there's any other there's no other path forward besides the path at hand, right? It's like we must fight for everybody as far as we can take it, because if we don't, they are just happy to take all of the services right down to the end. And I am aware that some of the language in bills that are going to come out soon, there is a word in some of it that is institutional or institutionalization. And when we start putting words like that back in legislation, especially in Indiana, everybody's like radar and alarm bells should be going off. I don't think it's going to be as simple as them just making a 3-year cap. I think their goal is to reduce services completely. And all of these people in very rural areas that are already driving, if they even have gotten their children into these schools, they're driving 30 minutes or an hour and a half just to ABA Center. That may not also include their occupational therapy and everything else down the line. And these parents, they're exhausted, they feel underrepresented, and they're just in a panic right now. I'm in a panic right now. So that's where it stands. It's a shit show.
Yeah, Chuck, just a couple minutes here. Can I get a quick comment on you from something in this segment? I don't know. Do you want to tackle that child care thing? Is that how we should be doing this now? We're just going to go to the taxpayers and do a referendum every couple years instead of, like I said, pooling our resources better, doing these things at the state level, doing these things at the federal level. This is the kind of care economy stuff that President Biden was talking about in Build Back Better that got shelved by Democrats like Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin.
Yeah, I guess as a real quick point, we all succeed when education is at its best. When we invest in learning the totality of human history, when we invest in those kids that have challenges, I mean, I look at, we have I have an autistic great nephew, and there's nothing wrong with them. They see things in a much different way than we do. And I actually think it's in some ways an evolution in the human genome, but I'll shelve that for a minute. But the biggest thing is we need to invest as a society in education at all stages and points and you talk about the totality of a society, the health of our society. The way we invest in our education is how we have a healthy democracy, how we have a healthy society. And then just making sure that we invest in, if somebody says they're pro-life, then make sure that they're investing in all of life from start to finish, whole spectrum. And that investment has to be all of us, not just some of us.
Yes, sir. Thank you. A couple quick points I wanted to make sure we got in before we have to go. So last week we mentioned that Marion County Sheriff Carrie Forrestal is running for state Senate in District 31. That seat is being vacated by Republican Senator Kyle Walker, who is not running for re-election. This week we got a challenger in the Democratic race. Catherine Torshevsky, a Fishers area realtor and small business owner, has entered as a Democrat. So not only Carrie Forrestal as Democrats' options there in that race. Also this week, Liz Brown, who you recall was a big advocate of the redistricting fight at the State House, well, she lost her job as judiciary chair in the state Senate, stripped of her gavel by leadership. Now, she was a big advocate of the redistricting. She fought really hard for it. She went to the mat for Trump, whereas her colleagues in the state Senate did not go along with her. Interesting to see that she is being removed from leadership. However, we should note that Cindy Carrasco, who is being installed as the new chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, was also a redistricting proponent. So I don't know if that necessarily was the fissure in their caucus as much as just being a general pain in the ass to leadership. Finally, I did want to make sure we all got this. I want to share with you this poster, and I'm going to put this up here. So in Indianapolis, this is 16-year-old RJ Williams. He has been missing since December 17th after last being seen at the McDonald's in Broad Ripple. He never boarded his usual bus home. His family says that is highly out of character given his strict routines and medical needs. His mother says police initially classified RJ as a runaway despite clear evidence he lacks the capacity to do so. They delayed issuing a silver alert that she believes should have been issued the first night. Few leads have emerged. RJ's backpack and gym bag were found near the White River. His phone briefly powered on twice the day after he disappeared, and surveillance footage shows him walking toward the bus stop, but not what happened after. Multiple agencies have conducted ground, drone, sonar, and water searches without success, while the family has criticized slow cooperation from businesses in releasing security footage over the holidays. Would they drop everything if this was a white girl? They just might. If you know anything about this case, if you have seen RJ or know anything about what happened to him after visiting McDonald's, please contact Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department at 317-327-6541. Again, that was 317-327-6541. Tabitha, you've been in contact with his mother, haven't you?
Yes, briefly. Basically, she just told me, here, let me go to my notes here. I want to make sure that I don't get it wrong. They are requesting that anybody that was in the area of East on 62nd Street between College and Congress, if they had their dash cameras on, if they could, help submit that to the police department, or look through it themselves to see if they saw anything, that'd be really helpful. And she's going to be reaching out to Crime Stoppers soon to post a reward. So I would imagine that she's going to probably need some help with that. But this is a really dire situation, and I would agree with you, Scott, that we all know if this was some white kid from Noblesville or Fishers, they would have found him by now. And that's just the fact. So, everybody that has any sort of a platform, if they can put something out there for this woman and for this family, I'm sure she'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. My heart breaks for her. All I want for my birthday is for that mom to have her kid home this week. I'm sorry, I'm going to lose it. I lost my son like 2 years ago this time of year, and I'm having a hard time. While I go find a tissue, why don't you guys tell the good folks where they can find you on our way out the door here today? Chuck, get us started.
So you can find my contact information at Hancock County Democrats, our website. I do want to say on the 28th of January, we will have one of our Secretary of State candidates, Evan Bayh, on in our speaker series for a discussion on topics critical to that race. So there'll be a lot of candidates we'll be interviewing or having participate. So just please check that out. We are going to be getting a link out for everybody to have access to that. And so just keep your eyes open, and love to see everybody on it.
Thank you, sir. Tabitha, where can the good folks find you? How about they'd want to download that podcast, huh?
Yeah, so we're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and basically just Google my name. I'm on all the platforms. So yeah, just Google Tabitha Zeigler or Staring Down the Storm, Autism Advocacy in America.
Very good. Jesse, take us home.
Yeah, don't Google my name or you'll find former Secretary of Veterans Affairs under Bill Clinton and a series of VA hospitals around the country. So instead, look at Jesse for Indy or at Naptown J Brown. Both of those are me on various social media platforms. I talk a lot. I've been taking a little bit of a hiatus just to regain some mental health around the holidays, but should have a weekly TikTok video / YouTube video coming out tonight with a constituent newsletter. I also write long form essays kind of every week, again, with a couple weeks break just recently. Sign up on my website, jesseforindy.com.
All right, very good. And you all can find me on the social medias at whosleft.us on Threads, Blue Sky, and Instagram. It is just at whosleft, and on all the rest. Again, until the end of the year, we do have that 30% off paid subscription special over at whosleft.us. I encourage you to make use of that while you still can over the next couple days. I will see you all in 2026 next Sunday. But until then, love each other, Indiana.